Welcome to Broadband Action, a podcast presented by the Community Broadband Action Network. I'm Curtis Dean. My co-host is John Willow, also a co-founder of C-Band. And joining us today to discuss esports is Jason Clark. He is one of the co-founders of the nascent Collegiate Fighting Game Conference. Jason, great to see you.
You as well.
Hey, Jason.
Hello.
Always good to catch up.
Absolutely. It's been a while. I was telling Curtis, it's been a minute, and I'm excited to talk to you guys.
I know.
Yeah.
There's so much that's been happening for you the last year and a half, and let's just jump right into it. While the world of esports doesn't necessarily seem like a broadband equity or infrastructure topic on the surface, which is what we cover here at Broadband Action, some excellent work has been done in communities to create high school and local college programs that do have a big impact. Jason, you've got a background in building successful esports programs in public high schools that provide a positive social culture, teach critical thinking skills, and improve the technology skills of both students and, you said, their parents. So now you and your partners and others, you're starting a new collegiate esports conference of typically non-league style games in a rapidly evolving esports world where existing leagues are shutting down or massively reorganizing to stay afloat and achieve institutional relevance. So the CFGC model is fundamentally different from what's out there now. Let's dive in. Jason, tell us, what is the CFGC and how did it come to be? Who's it for?
Yeah, so CFGC came about of typically there's plenty of esports, college and high school esports that revolve around like games people probably heard of, League of Legends, Valorant, stuff like that, Rocket League. But was severely underrepresented was fighting games, and that's like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Tekken, and part of it is they're traditionally like like one-on-one, face-to-face, right? And those games haven't had like a great netcode for it to be able to like, because if you think you're fighting one-on-one, every button mash, everything has to land, has to connect well. So you can't have any lag in that. But the newer games have all that to where even in our conference, like we have kids competing from Iowa all the way to Guam. So the reason we started it is because I've been involved in Scholastic College esports for around about 5 or 6 years now. And every semester I've done it, I've always had kids ask like, hey, do you guys do anything for fighting games? Do you do anything for fighting games? And I'm always like, nah, man, there's nothing really out there. And finally, one of the co-founders, he tweeted out or X'd out or whatever it's called, something along the lines of, hey, is there anything for fighting games? And I responded, man, I've been begging for it for years. Screw it. Let's build it. And so we started building it. And one of the things about fighting games is that it serves a population that doesn't typically have a face within esports. So it's a huge minority representation. And so now we wanted to create a home. So if those students wanted a place to play, then they would have a place to play. And that's how this all kind of started and jumped out.
So I guess you just had your first beta season, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And you've learned a lot. So give us a look into 2024 and beyond. What's the plan?
Yeah, so the idea is our beta went extremely well. We were very happy. We had a huge response to it. And it's one of those if we build it, they will come type situations. And so the plan now is we're going to do our first actual full season this spring, starting in February. That'll actually, versus going 3 weeks and a finals, it'll go like, I think right now we're playing 8 weeks and then a finals that will be in person. And we're working with developing partners for that. And then that'll be our first year. And we're pretty excited to see how that goes. That'll give us every bit of information we need to try to grow and move forward. The cool thing about fighting games, though, is that the FGC is what you'll hear it called. It's the fighting games community. It's very community-based. And so we try to keep that in mind. And as we build and move forward, it all comes back to what's best suited for them, because what's best suited for them will keep them trusting us. And that gives us the ability to keep growing and keep building. So that's our hope, is next fall to be a fully trustworthy league that colleges are more than happy to recruit for, and see this as somewhere they can send. And that, as colleges are willing to recruit for it, that opens up scholarship money for those kids that we want to serve. And so that'll give them an opportunity to play the game they enjoy, and get paid a little bit to go to school. And so that's our goal, and that's what we're working to. And I think this fall we'll see a pretty good representation of that.
So Jason, how do you feel that your model for this league is unique, and why do you think this is the right time for this type of league?
Yeah, so typically what leagues are really looking for is they want huge partnerships. They want to bring in all the money, the foreign investment, all that cool stuff. Is as I talked about before, with the idea of like it's community, the FGC is community. There are small communities out there everywhere, and they all have students in them. And I think if we keep pushing on building that community with our focus in collegiate, then that'll bring them in, right? That'll really kind of, what's the best way to word this? I guess this is what I said before. It'll give them a home. And so as we build, as long as we keep the community focus in mind, and we keep it mostly as affordable as we can, like we want to get partnerships to make it where we can. Oh my gosh, I butchered that. I hope that doesn't screw up your path.
Oh, you just start over at a good stopping point, and we'll clean this up in post.
Yes, and as long as you're going to re-answer, Jason, here's something I wasn't clear on, which is probably innate to you, but maybe not to everyone. When you were talking about getting collegiate buy-in, and so could you like sort of talk about how the teams work? Are they embedded in individual colleges? Is that where the partnerships come from? Are you looking to develop scholarship programs like from the league or from individual schools? We don't, just like over time, just kind of talk about how to draw people in and where you're drawing them to.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be when you answer this question, but let's just keep it in mind. All right.
Can do.
Would you like me to ask the question again, Jason?
You can. I have it right here too. I can just run from it if you'd like.
Yeah.
Unless it'd be better for you to have it. Okay. Yeah. So I think we're unique in the fact that we're very, very community focused, and I've seen the examples of that just in our beta. I'm in a lot of Discords, which is like primarily how it's our gamer version of Slack, right? And on that you'll see I'll see other leagues, and it's purely about the competition, which is awesome. That's great for them. For ours, because we want to stay true to that FGC, that fighting games community is what it's called. We really focused on building that community within our collegiate scene, of getting those kids where they can come and be like, hey, you're in college, I'm in college. This is something I don't get at my local, which is like where students will go to face those other people. Those are everywhere. They're really fun to go to if you get a chance. And I think, and I've seen them get in there. I've seen students jump in and say, man, I was terrible in that match. That was awful. And then them build them up, right? Like, nah, dude, you got to change this. Like helping their competition, right? Because they're just going to get better by doing that. But the fun thing about FGC is that while they're playing, there'll be so much trash talk. But I always equate it back to rugby, that when I played rugby, you'd hear the most vile things on the pitch, but then afterwards we're all best friends. And fighting games is a great representation of that. Where and I think it's part of that community, it's part of that identity, right? And we're wanting to pull that in on the collegiate side of giving those students that. And as I was talking about before, is as we build up that trust that we're here, we're a thing that's gonna stay. The scholarship, we think that primarily these kids that are coming out, one of the biggest representations of fighting games is in community colleges, and we've seen that through our beta too. Is that you get those type of kids who are underrepresented, and colleges are like esports is a way of recruitment for them, right? It's that unique tuition dollars that can come in, and they want to retain that money. And so we can look on that end of, hey, if we can give colleges, hey, I can recruit people for this league because I can trust they'll be around for 4 years. Then that gives them, hey, we're recruiting, and we have some scholarship money to recruit. That's cattail. And that's how
we always have pets in our podcast, so don't worry about that.
But yeah, so that's the idea, is that we want to, as they believe in us and we believe in the students, and we can build those partnerships with those universities, so they'll want to support us, financially. Like we have jobs, we're putting money into this. It'd be awesome to not have to watch my own bank account drain a little bit. But
That's
so
a tale as old as time, Jason. It's a project, as we all know.
It's
yeah,
every passion project.
absolutely. So that's the idea, and I think the huge focus here is community, and that's what the FGC, that's the fighting game community, and that's what we want to focus on, is to continuously build that community and just have that slow, structured, organic growth over time, versus like seeking out all the investment money in the world we can. Is that if we just focus on community and let the community build it up, let them trust us, we'll trust them, then the rest will come.
I just want to emphasize the word community there. It's so important. I mean, the inclusiveness of any community like this, but in many cases, I know online gaming can be one of the few ways for some kids to be able to have that community.
Absolutely.
And the fact that you're doing that with the fighting games is really cool. What if I could ask, what games are you guys did you do in your beta system or season? What games did you use, and what games are you planning on having people participate in this fall?
Yeah, in the beta, so the original idea is we wanted to focus on the games that don't have any representation in the collegiate or high school scene at all right now. And that was Street Fighter, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, and a game called Guilty Gear Strive, which is anime based, and all the kids love the anime based things. And so we really focused on those. We had a big calling for Smash, like Super Smash Brothers, which is what you see mostly in college, just because it's people can get behind the idea of, you know, Mario fighting Pikachu, but it gets a little rougher when you have Mortal Kombat and someone ripping someone else's head off, right? Typically you would think that schools you don't want to have like the IU logo on that. So Smash has always been the go-to, and our thought was, well, there's tons of Smash, right? Kids, there's plenty of opportunity for students to play Smash. So let's focus on the ones, we'll be the guys that everyone is like, oh, I don't know if we'll buy into those games. But they have, because there's people that want to play them, right? And I think when you have that, there's that demand, if you push that supply, it'll be great. Moving forward, we really seen that, like, we go back to that equity idea, and one of the things that you see a lot in collegiate esports is everything usually evolves around, right, like the mouse and keyboard.
Yeah.
But I look back when I was growing up, like I never had a computer, and when I did want a gaming thing, one of my favorite stories is that I got a Nintendo 64, and I was super excited, and I didn't even question why anything. It was just like wrapped and was there. And it was because my biological mother bought it from a pawn shop. And so I was thinking, like, man, there's a ton of kids out there. And you see that a lot in like lower of the economic scale of kids. And then a lot of like there was actually the esports director of Southern Law actually put it out that if you're going to recruit and focus and make things equitable for Black students, you got to keep in mind that they grow up on what we call the sticks, on the controller as well, right? On these guys. And so that's the thing in fighting games. It's all about that, the sticks. But then the other thing we're seeing now is the rise of mobile gaming. Like the biggest market, the most money in gaming is in mobile. And so we're like, well, that's just another spot that doesn't have any representation. So our next build out is looking at like those mobile games that we can build into. And I think one of the bigger ones is Brawlhalla. So we're really looking at that one, because that'll give, regardless of what you have, most, not all, but most have a phone or some kind of device like that. So we're trying to do everything we can to get this in an opportunity for the kids that normally haven't had it.
This is really interesting because just full disclosure, Curtis and I met Jason about a year and a half ago. We got a chance to sit down and really talk with him and learn about his origin story of the cause work that he's been doing, the really important work. And it all kind of goes back to rural Indiana. And I would love it if you would share a little bit about how you came to the discovery that esports was a winner for broadband equity in isolated communities.
Yeah, so I think that's the thing when it comes to broadband. I always go back to the idea that, like, I grew up in rural Indiana. Everyone I was around, like, none of us had any of this stuff. Right? I remember when I was growing up, it was still like the dial-up, which if you were trying to use AIM, it was like spotty at best, right? If it's going to work or not. And then when I first had the opportunity, it was like my first or second year in the teaching. I just finished my master's, and we had some kids push like, "Hey, can we do esports?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, that sounds awesome." Like I grew up doing like LAN parties and stuff.
And you were in Richmond, Indiana, right?
Yeah, Richmond, Indiana. Yeah. And I grew up like going to like the arcade in the mall and watching like my cousin play Tekken and not let me play because I was the weird little cousin. Go away. And so when we first started it, like we were able to get it was called a rural low income grant from the Department of Ed. And I remember when we submitted it all, it was like gaming chair, gaming monitor, gaming keyboards, all this stuff, and everything got kicked back except the monitors because I think that's what we didn't put gaming with monitor. It was just monitor, and we were like, what the heck, man? And they were like, yeah, you're not going to get gaming. Rename everything. So we did like ergonomic chair and stuff like that. And everything got approved. And it was like, okay, wow, like we're one of the few programs that's actually going to have like a lab, and the students went absolutely nuts. Like we had no idea like what was going to come out of it, like how many students we were going to have. And we ended up, I think it was, I remember right, something like 107 come out after we said there were rules, like 90 something stuck around. And then when I looked at the data of it, like 86 or something like that didn't do anything else in the school. They had no other identity of the school. And my favorite story of that is when they came up one day and they came like a little squad. They came in the hallway. I'm like, Mr. Clark, we need to talk. And I was like, yeah, what's up? And they're like, we want to get together and name the team. And I was like, what do you nerds talk about? Name a team. And I was like, we already have a team name. Like we're the Richmond Red Devils. And they were like, it's because they were so disconnected from school. It was just a place they had to go. Versus like
they didn't even think of themselves as part of the school identity.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so when you see the research says that like once you tie yourself into the school, if you do any kind of like band or soccer or whatever, then you're going to see a grade boost. You're going to see involvement.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And so this esports was like just a missing of all the kids have their thing. Esports was a missing thing that just as a school, we didn't realize. And so once they came out, like it was great. Like they would be at the lab door, like crawling in like DayZ trying to crawl in like zombies. So once we actually started competing and started getting kids going and playing, most of them, and so we had to buy controllers because most of them they'd never used a PC in their life. Well, as for gaming wise, they've always used it for whatever. And a lot of them, the most they'd use the computer was a Chromebook. So having like an actual like desktop PC and them learning what like a GPU is and a CPU and, you know, the hertz of the screen, all that cool stuff. Mm-hmm. We saw like an overall full letter grade boost within a year on average of all those students. Wow. And so I remember one of the things I was really focused on was getting some kind of merch, right? Something that said like Red Devil Esports or something. And some of the kids, I remember I had to have like that grown man mentor talk of like, hey buddy, you know, you've worn that jersey like 4 days in a row. Like it really stands out. We need to chat about this real quick. And fortunately, as you said, those lower income students, the school we worked at had laundry service. So we were able to like, let's get it down there and get a little freshen up a little bit. And then you can pop your jersey back on. But it was just because they never had anything like that. And when they were most of them at home, like the town itself had like a decent internet access. But like once you pushed out, like my parents were 10 minutes out of town and they were still debating, do we want to use this dial-in or do we want to like spend for the satellite, right? And a lot of those kids were like that. They lived just outside where they didn't have anything. And this was 2016, 2017, right? And so as we had that opportunity in the school, now we could actually start to focus in like, hey, we got them here. Hey, you're playing Fortnite. This is fun. Now let's learn how we can communicate. Here's how we talk to people on the internet versus just being anonymous, right? Here's the thing John and I talked about before is like, here's how you just be a professional human being on the internet, that digital literacy, right? So that's our fun little background of esports.
You know, I think it's kind of illuminating to talk a little bit about your high school's population too. This was a rural high school in a classic Midwest scenario where, you know, in Indiana, just like all of our other Midwestern states, you've got some shining jewel academic and urban centers, and then you have like just insane rural poverty, just
Absolutely.
devastating rural poverty, and you know, just like the rural broadband equity situation that CBAN is specifically working on in Iowa. You had this, you know, Richmond had all those same challenges and none of the support that we're enjoying now. So who are those kids? And you know, you said they were living on the fringes, but this wasn't a high school where most people were affluent and only a few people were out on the edges, right? Like, you really had to build something from the ground up, including educating people about why this is important. Yeah.
So it was so the town itself, it was one of those like typical Midwestern town where back in the day it had beautiful giant industry, right? There was a whole side of town that has these old giant beautiful factory buildings that are all mostly just empty inside, and one was an underwear factory that you could no longer go inside because of some chemical, and I'm like, well, that's weird because it was for underwear. But that's just the story of rural Midwest infrastructure, right? And so, and so most of the kids that went there, like this town, it was, I think at its peak, it was at like 70,000. And right now it sits about 25. Like, as industry left, people leave, right? As people get older and realize there's just nothing for me to do here, they leave. And the high school was having the brain drain where everyone was going. And so the student population itself, like I said, we qualified for a rural low income grant, and that was because the poverty level at the school. We also qualified for the 100%. Beginning way more popular to have like a free lunch overall. The entire school, the free lunch program. They had to do lunch trucks in the summer, which when they came out with them, people got so mad. They're like, "Oh, why are you going to have like food trucks?" It was because they had to go set up in neighborhoods to feed kids because they weren't going to eat otherwise.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was the kind of community that we were in. And even in those food trucks, they had to change the rules after a year because parents were coming up.
Yeah.
The parents were like, "Hey, like, this is awesome. You're feeding my kid, but is there any chance I can get anything left over?" So they had to like find more money for that. So that's the kind of community that had this. And in that situation, like, when you're looking at like survival of like, hey, I need to get a food truck, or I'm buying what I can for my kid at the pawn shop, right? When it comes to the digital literacy or that digital equity or any of that, it's not at the forefront of thought, right? When you're thinking about survival. But in the long run, if you want to find that success in our modern age, right, it's very important. And so I think esports is a way that draws kids in because they're like, hey, I can find that escapism for a little bit just by playing Rocket League. Sorry if I hit my mic. Little hard here. And then parents getting them to buy in because they're like, why is my kid focused on this? And so once you get that data of like, well, look, there's a whole letter grade bump. Also, like, a lot of the stuff you get in gaming too is like it has that reputation. And it's an earned reputation, don't get me wrong, of being kind of vile because of that anonymous factor, right? And esports is a way to really kind of like put some governance around it, right? So if you're gonna have students come in, then it's, hey, there's expectations on how you talk to each other. There's expectations on how we interact, because like one of our very first matches, and it's the funniest thing in the world to me, but I had to be a professional about it, was that we played a match, League of Legends. We lost. The other school, one of the kids in game chat sent a link. One of my kids clicked on it, which I always told them don't do it, but no. Through these students. And luckily it wasn't a bad link. The link itself, well, I guess it was bad to them, was how to uninstall that game.
That's kind of a jab.
And so like they were kind of devastated, so we had to have a little talk about that. And like the old gamer in me was like, oh, that was good, but
right.
Good burn, but wrong.
But from the educator standpoint, it was like, well, let's talk through this, and this is a great opportunity to talk to the other program, right, and talk to the other coach, and still talk with that guy today. And those kids, they all learned a valuable lesson. But no, it was just fun. It just,
well, as an educator, as
Go
an
ahead.
educator, you're always looking for those teachable moments, right?
Absolutely.
And they're
Yeah.
usually not in the curriculum. They're usually something that happens on the side that allows you to go, aha, I can teach a lesson here. I can help this person with a life skill they may need later. So
if a college was if you when you were I assume that one of the actions of the league's building is to form relationships and partnerships with individual colleges. What do you tell them? How do you get schools interested in signing up for something that big? Because as we all know, there's lots of pressures on every institution just to maintain what they've got.
Yeah, and so for one, the easiest way on that is we're another tool they can use to recruit, right? They because right now, if you're looking at like, hey, I'm going to put up a team for Rocket League, you can have 3 people, right? And then you can say we're going to have 3 teams, so they're going to I could recruit 12 for Rocket League, or I can recruit 10 for League of Legends. So you can, and you don't want to have multiple 20 teams, which you can, but it doesn't really serve anyone if you're just
waters it down too much.
Yeah, you don't want to be I got recruited to be on our 8th team, right? So we're just another tool of, hey, this is something else I can recruit for that I can put students into, and that's because every collegiate director has a recruiting goal, right? From their admin, it's how I always talk about it. Like a friend of mine just got a job in Defiance College in Ohio. And he was really focused on like, oh, I want to build the community. I want to do this. And it's like, well, man, you got to recruit. Like, that's all they're going to want to hear about, because if you want to do the fun, cool job, you got to bring the money in, right? Because it always comes back to that. And so he got his recruiting goal. And so now he's looking at like, I can do such and such for this, such and such for this game. But now we offer 4 more games that you can bring kids in and they have a purpose while they're there. You get the tuition dollars. If we build a good enough of a league that students are hyped for, then that's retention for them, right? They can say, well, you can compete next year because they're still here, right? And that's the goal on that. The other one is part of that retention of keeping them with us is part of my job is when I first developed this, I reached out to every single director that I knew and said, what would you want to see in the league? And of course, their first thing is, because the esports world's so fickle, as you talked about at the start, is, well, what's your guys' like, are you going to be around? And part of that is I was pretty straightforward. And I said, well, we don't have any outside investors, right? We're not, and our plan is not to let any big investor come in and say, hey, here's what I want in return, because we want to be able to put as much back into it. If it's a slow growth thing, that's fine. That's why we focus on the community, because the community will grow us, we'll grow them. And once you talk about that, then that gets them that buy-in, because also they see that we're here for student-wise. We're not here because I want to buy a mansion, right? And so, and the other one is like, all of us that are involved are esports guys, right? Like, I'm a former director. One of my partners, he is a current director at Oklahoma Christian. One of the other ones is a business esports professor at Harrisburg. Like, we're all esports guys, and we all want to see, here's what's best for the student. Here's an opportunity that we see they don't have. And I think once we talk to college directors and talk to their programs, then they can see, okay, these are some we want to buy in. And then we add in other things too. Like one of our advisory board members, Dr. Holman, he's at St. Cloud. He actually has his doctorate from Purdue in Tekken, and it's a long title that somehow I didn't think in gaming someone would be able to like make me go, what the heck is this? But it's like tournament sub-game theory. So he's really a doctor of fighting games. And he really wants to be like, hey, I really want to implement all this stuff I researched into a league. Awesome, dude. Let's do it. Right. And we've had so many schools reach out and go, hey, not only do we have students that want to play, but we also have students that do socials, or they do production, or so on and so forth. So put your students into us, right? Like we don't have the money to pay everybody, so we can do an internship wise and they can get credit for you. Awesome. Let's do it. And so that just opens up tons of educational opportunities that schools can buy in, not just to have someone fight in one of the games, but also like they can build their portfolios, they can build who they are. So, but yeah,
we're gonna bring the plane in for a landing here, Jason. Appreciate it. We could talk about this, I think, for a lot longer, but in the interests of keeping our podcast to the about the right length, got one last question for you. On your beta season, how many schools were represented in that beta season? And tell me what your goals are for your next season.
Yeah. So part of once we put it out there, we did a rolling sign up, right? So our promotion on it was, if we get people competing, we promote that, like, hey, they did this, and we get to directors, we'll have more sign up. And by the end of it, we had representation from 71 schools.
Wow.
Like I said, that was all the way from the University of Guam to the Jersey Institute of Technology, like everything in between, right? And a few in Canada, we had one in Alaska. Like, we were all over the map on it. But we kept seeing pockets, right? We would see like a few outlier schools. There's big pockets because those, like I said, it's fighting against community. They talk and they grow outwards. So when we would hit, like, say, the University of Iowa, we saw a big pop from people in Iowa, from Iowa State and Iowa and stuff like that, out to Missouri and to Minnesota. The same thing in Florida. Like, we had a few people jump in from USF in Florida, and then we saw like community colleges in Central Florida and Florida State. We saw it just push out from there. So the goal is to keep hitting those pockets and keep letting it organically grow as students want to join. And again, it just, as that slow growth, right? Like, we're not purposely pushing out saying like, let's get to every director we can to sign up, because we realize who we are. Like, we're learning a lot of this, right? Like, the word deliverables was pretty new to me. So as we grow out, that's the idea. It's hit those pockets, we'll grow from there. Hit the next pocket, grow from there. And that'll be our slow, sustained growth. And then, like I said, and that's the hope. And again, it goes back, the college kids see the same thing that the high school kids see, right? Like, some of the kids that join, like, there was a student from Boise State. They're not a part of their esports program because their esports program doesn't offer it. But we still, like, yeah, you're a college student, you can join. So they didn't, like, same thing with the high school kids. They didn't do anything else at the school. They just went to Boise State. So now they're going to their director saying, hey, can I be a part of your program and keep doing this thing? And back to that, I was talking about my little nerds in high school, that gets them tied in. And now they have a purpose. They'll want to, especially if they get involved in their esports program, those expectations, those rules I talked about were academic and behavior and stuff like that, right? So now they have a standard. Hey, I need to live the standard if I want to keep doing this, if I want to rock the Boise State, right? And so hoping to see the same type of growth on that.
That is so exciting. Just a final comment. As a teacher myself too, I see this opportunity for you to get in and reach some of these kids at the community college level who are uninvolved, like the kids in your high school programs, where I almost wonder, like, is that a selling point to a community college where less than half the students who enroll graduate? Like, absolutely. Is there a way to like to lock into something bigger than just esports with these institutions? I just see a lot of exciting possibility.
Yeah, and that's part of why I said that esports adds that governance, right? Like, when you get that in, then you can start offering, like, some schools even have like an esports major, like there's a esports, esports management, which really is just sports management, right? So you're still learning all those things that would go with that. You're just narrowing your focus over onto esports, but you still get the idea of management and people leadership and all that cool stuff. And I think community college is the same way, because, like we talked about earlier, like the small communities, there was a small one next to me called Connorsville, and there used to be a Ford plant there, and that was like the blood of the town, right? And they left. That company left, and that town was dead in the water for years. And then another company was coming in, and it was back to that literacy thing. It was crazy to see that, like, the day they announced, they had congressmen, all that cool stuff there. The next day, the bank had like a line of people wanting loans because they're like, oh, I'm going to get a job over here. Because they'd grown up like, I just work in the factory in town. That's what I do. But then that factory said, hey, like, because of the way that technology is now, essentially everyone we hire is going to have at least an associate's degree in like engineering or something like that, manufacturing. Oh, wow. And that like blew all their minds, because like, well, how am I going to do this, right? How does this even work? But if you add in something like esports to that, of like, hey, you can come do esports, focus on like those trade jobs, right? Because those are still super needed. Then that's another reason to go to school. You get that education, and now you have those doors of those opportunity opening for you, even at that level. So I think it all comes back to that recruitability and retention, right? Because I think when I was recruiting, there were so many kids I would reach out to that like they weren't even thinking about college. They were just like, I'm going to graduate and find a job because that's rural Indiana. That's what you do. But now they're like, oh, cool. I can go to this regional campus, pay a super low tuition, get a lot. I think the tuition at the campus I was at was a public school. We were at like, it was like $7,800. And then after it was all said and done, like the tuition was like $800 for the year.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so you're, what was that? $3,200 for a bachelor's degree. Like, and you have to play some games and learn a lot. And part of that is just being that mentor of, hey, I've been through this. Let's work together. Let's see what your resources are and get the best out of this we can. I think that's part of what kind of comes back to esports is you're a mentor to kids that typically haven't had one, right? And so you can kind of guide them along on it. But anyways, I got long-winded again. So,
well, obviously there's a lot of passion there, and you share that passion with a lot of people, and it's really neat. And we're really happy, Jason, you're able to put your passion to work on something that serves a larger goal. So congratulations to you and
thank you.
to your partners. And our guest today has been Jason Clark, one of the co-founders of the Collegiate Fighting Game Conference. On behalf of John Willow, I'm Curtis Dean. Thank you all for joining us here today on Broadband Action.